We've got now 3 case studies of work that's being done in this new environment, thinking in new ways about bringing true digital humanities project, the integration of manuscript studies with digital tools and processes. And I want to highlight these, give a chance for you to hear. Carolina Melis is working with Michael Jervers in the University of Toronto and is working on fabrics.
Thank you, Steve. Let me start by sharing my screen. And it has been very interesting to hear everybody's presentations. I hope you're enjoying mine. And I'm going to be very brief. Okay, so basically I'm going to be presenting information about the project they're currently working with Professor Jervers and a large team of experts from around the world. So it's the Ethiopian manuscripts. It's titled the Ethiopian Manuscripts in the Global Textile Trade from the 15th to the 19th centuries. So textile paste downs are pieces of cloth that are affixed to the insides of the front and back covers of manuscripts bound with tooled leather. Their soft texture, color, and design contrast with the harder binding components of wood and leather. Textile paste downs have received, though, very little scholarly attention. Richard Pankhurst published between 1980 and 1986 3 articles in which he provided detailed descriptions of textiles found in a total of 149 manuscripts ranging from the 16th to the 19th centuries. The manuscripts included in these studies are held in British institutions. Later, Eva Waliska Wikatoa, Rita Koska, Alessandra Balsi, and Dennis Nosmith also touch on textile paste downs within their article on Ethiopian cataloguing. 4 decades later, Michael Jervers, Eyob Derillo, and a team of textile experts conducted a small pilot studies of 158 manuscripts. This time, the textiles investigated were not only from the British Library or English institutions, but from manuscripts photographed in Ethiopia, in repositories like the Gundangunde Monastery and other churches in Tigray, Gojam, and Wollo. The results from this pilot study were presented at the Silk Roads and the Book Workshop organized by the University of Toronto and hosted by the Institute of Advanced Studies in June of this year. Again, all the textiles identified were imported. Most of the textiles, as I mentioned, were not from Ethiopia, most of them coming from India, but others were coming from European countries like India, France, and Italy. Some unique samples are believed to come from Africa, others from the Middle East, East Asia. We have samples from Egypt, Iran, the Ottoman Empire, and China. These high-end fabrics are made of silk, cotton, or a combination of both. Some are of solid color, or are and some bear fine embroidery or are woven with metal wrapped silk. Contained in wooden and leather-bound manuscripts, these fragments gives us a rare opportunity to uncover many aspects of early modern Africa and its far-reaching geographical connections. Very briefly, our research project will pursue 6 major themes that are related to everything regarding the physical aspects of the textiles, the trade networks that they can help us uncover, the meaning of these fabrics in Ethiopian manuscripts, the role they play in the larger context of textile imports and dress, We also like to learn what is the relationship of textile pastels and their connection to Ethiopian arts. And finally, what is the role that imported textiles played in a changing socio-economic norms of Ethiopian society in the 15th to the 19th centuries? To find answers to our many questions, we will use a variety of research methods that includes, first of all, we'll pursue to enlarge our research collection so we want to increase the number of manuscripts and their textile pastels. Secondly, we will conduct a detailed analysis so that we can identify, the textile experts will conduct this detailed analysis so that we can identify and classify them. We also plan to spend some time in Ethiopia to get more knowledge or to know better the scribers and the makers of manuscripts and bindings, hoping to learn more about their oral history and what they have to say about the bindings and the textiles. And the plan would also be to meet with the textile merchants to better understand the trade networks, the historical trade networks. We will also study and or review textual sources that date from the 14th century forward. So central to our study is the plan and systematic formation of a solid research collection that will reside on a digital database. It is estimated that there are many manuscripts existing today in Ethiopia and Eritrea. They could be from 25 to 200,000, and our rough estimate is that about 15% of them contain textile pastels. With these high numbers, our collection can reach the thousands of records. Currently, we have acquired about 1,000 sets of images of the textiles that were collected from North America, Europe, and Ethiopia. Other excellent sources were the digital collection at the Hill Museum and the Monastery Library, and Ethiosphere. However, we will have not been able to reach this number without Steve Delamarter's EMIP contributions. It is imperative to consider the kind of data to collect that will allow us to answer our research questions. As you can see at the moment, this file resides on a Google Drive, and I'm glad to hear from Gary that we can get some add-ons to make it more functional and productive. Eventually, however, we hope to have a proper website and a proper database where it should reside. Anyways, this is just to give you a brief overview, but the original data of textiles can help us identify the trade networks, what were the ocean and land routes, and also help us determine if the textiles can be a tool to date manuscripts. The variations in the origin of textiles can inform us about the changes in socioeconomic norms. The fibers determine the appearance of the textile, but they also reveal the textile technology that was available at the time. On the other hand, silk was reserved only for the king's court. Therefore, there is much we can learn from the kind of fiber used. The presence of seams is evidence of a former utilitarian function. Were they fragments of curtains or clothing? Color has significance as well, so we hope to identify their meaning. It also speaks to the preference Ethiopian had for textiles and also market trends. The description of fabrics and their aesthetics allows us to better identify them when represented in this Ethiopian visual arts. We are currently also working with the team at the University of Hamburg. We hope to connect very soon to see how we can integrate our database, or first of all, create it appropriately so that it can eventually later be incorporated into the Beta Masahev database that captures all the collations at a global level. In this case, anyway, so I'll just click this one. So in conclusion, textile pastels found in Ethiopian Christian manuscripts from the 15th to the 19th centuries constitute a rich source of information about the early modern history of Ethiopia, Eastern Africa, and other countries, everything that connected them to the global trade network. In addition to trade, fashion, and garments, textile pastels will help us uncover nuanced aspects of Ethiopian social, cultural, and religious practice. The study of Ethiopian binding materials, and in particular, the textile pastels contained in them, may add context to the study of the texts in manuscripts. The sheer number of manuscripts available and the thousands of data pieces to be generated require careful planning, a quantitative approach, data science knowledge, and visualization tools for delivering the narratives that will emerge from our study. Digital technology will facilitate that our data is accessible, searchable, and that it can be integrated into bigger databases like Beta Masahev. So thank you very much. We hope, first of all, we hope to embark soon on this research project, and we hope to get the funding that we required, and also complete this project so that we soon in the future can share it with all of you. And I just provide a short list of selected literature about imported textiles and textile pastels. Thank you very much for your attention.
Carolina, wonderful. My goodness. We will all keep our fingers crossed as this goes up before SSHRC, the Research Council, Canadian Research Council, to get funding. It's truly marvelous, the world of things that's going to open up for us. Thank you for your nice, tight, clean, clear presentation. Really appreciate it. I'm going to suggest that we move next to Dawit Muluneh. Dawit is working with the Princeton Ethiopic Miracles of Mary project, and is going to do a presentation on some of the work of that project. So Dawit.
My name is Dawit Muluneh, and I'll be presenting about the PEM project today. I want to take a second to thank Steve Delamarter for inviting me to do this presentation, and Wendy Belcher for bringing me on the team nearly a year ago to work on this exciting project. What is PEM? PEM stands for the Princeton, Ethiopian, Eritrean, and Egyptian Miracles of Mary Digital Humanities Project. And it is a comprehensive resource for the miracle stories written about the Virgin Mary in Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Egypt, and preserved in the Ge'ez language between the 1300s and the present day. This project was started by Wendy Belcher in 2018. Before talking about the project in detail, it will benefit us to say a few words about Ta'amir Mariam, which translates into Miracles of Mary. Prior to these miracles arriving in Ethiopia, other parts of the world, like the Levant and Europe, were beginning to write down the miracles that Saint Mary was said to have performed for the faithful. These miracles became widely popular and eventually entered Ethiopia sometime around the 14th century during the time of Dawit. Although this genre did not originate in East Africa, it was most favorably accepted in Ethiopia and present-day Eritrea. We get a sense of this phenomenon by the large number of miracles that have been produced in these regions. What is fascinating about Ta'amir Mariam is that each manuscript contains different number of miracles in different orders, making very few manuscripts exactly the same in content or order. For this reason, it is best to think of Ta'amir Mariam as a library rather than a single book. To truly appreciate the contribution of PEM, consider the following analogy. Earlier, I mentioned it is best to think of Ta'amir Mariam as a library rather than a book. Expanding this a bit further, think of each miracle within a given manuscript being analogous to any given books within a library. Needless to say, each Ta'amir Mariam manuscript serves as the library in this example. Well, just as each library is unique, with some having more books than others, academic libraries focusing on more technical themed books than local libraries, so is each manuscript distinct and unique, offering different number of miracles and different themed stories. But imagine having been tasked with finding your favorite book in a library, wherein none of the books have been cataloged. To make this even more challenging, imagine if none of the books have their title made visible on their cover and they were not shelved alphabetically. That means the only way you can find what you're looking for is by opening each book and reading through the material to see if it is in fact your desired book. Well, that's essentially what scholars would have had to do prior to that PEM project. Without knowing what miracles are contained in a specified manuscript, one would have to read through each story to find the desired miracle. In a nutshell, PEM is doing what librarians have been doing for years, creating a system to better locate written documents. By being able to catalog the miracles, PEM will provide a powerful tool to help scholars understand and answer questions about Ta'amir Mariam, which previously would have been impossible. Questions related with dating, for example, are some stories more popular in some centuries than others? Or questions related with province, are some stories more popular in some regions than others? Or are the themes of the Ethiopian miracles, what are the themes of the Ethiopian miracles? Are men or women protagonists more common? Are they young or old, and so on and so forth? Now, I would like to demonstrate how the Incipit tool works. First, I find a manuscript that I'm interested in and locate a particular miracle that I would like to identify. And then I type in the first few lines of the miracle into the Incipit search bar located here. Note, the Incipit does not include the introductory section of the miracle. And the tool is then able to match the Incipit that I typed from my manuscript with the Incipits from other manuscripts that are within the system. By doing this, the tool is able to recognize the miracle ID or the story ID. Following the library analogy, it's like identifying the title of the book by being able to type in the first paragraph into a database. In addition to this feature, the tool will also tell you of all other manuscripts that include the miracle you just identified, located here in, I guess, purple. In this case, all these manuscripts contain the miracle ID 125, which is about the Cannibal of Qemer. A person who's interested in doing research then can go back to these manuscripts and compare the stories and ask the intriguing questions I referred to earlier. That's an overview of the PEM project, and I hope you can see the exciting new possibilities digital humanities has to offer. If anyone wants to come to see this process in action, you're welcome to join us on one of our Friday sessions, and you're invited to hang out and translate or watch as the team translates the Miriam stories. You can email me or let Wendy Belcher know if you're interested. Thank you for your time.
Oh, Dawit, this is wonderful. And it's such a great example of this new kind of work that's being done. To watch that Incipit tool do its magic is just an amazing thing. And our salute to Dr. Wendy for assembling a spectacular team, yourself and Mahari and Jeremy, to be the sort of technical experts about textual stuff. It's just really good. Thank you. Thank you. Jeremy Brown is going to be our final presenter here to talk about, we'll follow on with the Cannibal of Qemer theme here.
Steve, Wendy, and I have been working on the Cannibal of Qemer for several years now and trying to take on one of these next-gen projects. So just like Dawit introduced, there's just an amazing amount of diversity in the Miracles of Mary. It's an expansive work. It's a library rather than a singular text, with hundreds of stories, hundreds of manuscripts across the very wide chronological development of the text. And so the PEM project is doing this very wide sweep as its approach to the Miracles of Mary, looking at hundreds of manuscripts, hundreds of miracles. The Cannibal of Qemer project is able to do a deep dive into a singular text. So we're looking at just one miracle, the ID 125, the Cannibal of Qemer story. And we're seeking to understand its textual history and the changes that this text has undergone over time and also across geographic regions. So if our target is to understand textual history and how it develops over time and over geography, you have to think very carefully about how you make your manuscript sample. What kind of data set lets you ask those questions? And so 93 manuscripts with provenance were selected to try and take on this question. With provenance means that we've largely walked away from manuscripts in Western collections. These are primarily manuscripts photographed or microfilmed in situ in Ethiopia so that we know where they were located, at least at the time of filming. So for the question of chronological scope, we selected between 10 and 20 manuscripts for each of the centuries in which Miracles of Mary manuscripts are copied. We'd like to have more from the 14th and 15th century, but we just don't have that many, and many of the ones that we do have do not have provenance. So we've got 10 to work with here. And then for geographic scope, we're using a working theory that there are 3 geographic regions in which these manuscripts are produced. The west, Gondar, Tana, and Gojam, the south, Wollo and Shoa, and then the north, Tigray and modern-day Eritrea. And so we have between 30 and 32 manuscripts from each of those regions. And we've broken it down. This is our spreadsheet of all of the witnesses, where and when they were produced. And so we've been trying to keep track of both the chronological and the geographic range for each of these manuscripts. And so we then, after you identify a data set, then you have to start doing the work of it. And so we have 2 independent transcriptions for each of the manuscripts. And these were then compared using a collation tool to come up with a transcription that's very accurate, well over 99% accurate. And then these transcriptions were prepared in a machine readable format so that we can run them through the Theot scripts like Gary spoke about. And that is no small feat with 93 manuscripts. That took a chunk of time, and there's a certainly amount of trial and error as you go to collate something and you realize, oh no, I didn't have that quite in the right spot, and going back and reworking. So it's quite the process, but it leads to some pretty amazing outcomes. And one of those is the dendrogram. So here is our manuscripts in the dendrogram. This shows you the relationship of the manuscripts to one another. So as Gary pointed out, this isn't a stemma. This is more a relationship chart. And so we see some really interesting things. We see, first off, just overview, we see 4 main text types have appeared, 4 main clusterings of manuscripts. Down here, this cluster 1 is the oldest form of the text. These are manuscripts produced in the royal scriptoriums of Emperor Dawit II and Emperor Tsar Yaakov. And then we see this very interesting stair-stepping pattern. It took a while to understand what stair-stepping patterns mean, but these are scribes who are doing slight editings over time. Rojas Zermont has a great quote that every Ethiopian scribe is an editor as well. And so we see some of these small edit moves that have adapted the text as the miracles of Mary were internalized into the church. And then we see a moment that has led to two new text types to appear, recensions 2 and 3. They have a number of shared readings. That's what this fork means, is that there's a number of shared readings that 2 and 3 have together against 1, but they also are defined against one another. And lastly, we have this recension 4, which is an interesting abridged form of the text, that a number of the verses have been taken out, and it's a much more compact version of the story. Perhaps it would be read a little bit quicker in church. These clusters 10, 11, and 13 speak to manuscripts that are kind of going their own way. They're doing their own thing. Either that's because they're mixed texts, which is a number of these, that they are mixed between 1 and 2 or 1 and 3, or that the scribe has made a number of edits and led the story onto its own path a bit. And so our conscientious approach to selecting the data set means we can also ask questions about chronology and geography. And so when we look at this chronologically, we see that the greatest concentration of our old manuscripts are in recension 1. So 15th and 16th century manuscripts marked with the black arrows. And it's also interesting to note that there are several of them out here in these unaligned and outlier sections. So these are manuscripts that attest scribes going their own way. They're working out how the story's going to go. There's a fair amount of creativity in the early period. We also see that recensions 2 and 3 both arise in the 17th century and continued to be copied, some of them all the way into the 20th century. And then this abridged version of recension 4 is also in the 17th century and continues to be copied into the 20th century. For geography, we can also look and see where these manuscripts were copied. So here we see the dominance of the South in recension 1, and then less attestation, but still attested in recensions 2 and 3, and also in these unaligned passages or unaligned groups. In the North, we see a fair amount of influence in recension 1, and then also scattered throughout the rest of the development of the text. And then the West, we interestingly see relatively little attestation in recension 1, but very strong influence in recensions 2, 3, and 4. So it enables us to ask some pretty interesting questions of what was going on? Why were some of these manuscripts outliers to their geographic region? So it's especially true with this witness out here, a manuscript photographed in the West and is really out on its own in comparison to the rest of its geographic development. And the dates tell us this was copied in Emperor Tsar Yaakov's royal scriptorium. And so perhaps this is a manuscript that was copied in the scriptorium and then sent out, which we know was happening with a lot of the Tamramarian manuscripts in that time period. So lastly, some next steps. The dendrogram points towards relationships between manuscripts, and that means that there are distinct readings that define these groups. So then we can put on our philological hats and we can start to look at what defines these readings, how do they define the groups, and this has led to critical editions. Since this is a textual history project, we've created edited editions for all 4 of the text types. Here you see the critical edition for recension 1. So this is looking to capture the earliest form of the text. So we've decided to use a 2-apparatus approach. The top apparatus looks at the core witnesses to the earliest recension. And so you get a sense of the variants that existed earliest in the tradition. And then the second apparatus looks at variants in these outlier manuscripts, the less core witnesses to recension one. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great fun, this stuff. Summarize a couple things. Can you see our Grand Renaissance Dam again? I'm assuming so. So we've been asking ourselves, what are some of the things we're going to have to do to get another 10,000 into the reservoir, and the metadata that's necessary? And then how are we going to help researchers find and aggregate the data? And what could we do if we had lots of manuscripts and metadata in the reservoir? I'm hoping it's quite clear to you that there's so much work that needs to be done. This is the calling of our generation, I think. And it's going to require the combined efforts of an entire generation and even beyond. This is part of the beauty of the Beta Metzhof system, is that it's an environment in which swarms of people have access and are working together to create initial data, then to keep refining that data as time goes on. The next new generation of manuscript studies is going to require us to think differently about issues of access, about cataloging, digital literacy of a humanities scholar, right? Interdisciplinary collaboration, data science, books as artifacts with paratextual data and not just receptacles for texts, and many more things. So it's just I just think we're in a great moment in time.
And I'd like to thank everybody for their exciting and provocative and insightful discussions and presentations. It's been really wonderful to see you all here and everything, and get people together. As far as next session in this series, we're looking at a December timeframe. We might go on hiatus for a month, but if we don't do it in December, we'll definitely be back in March with Sarah Derbu, talking about Blacks in the Greco-Roman Empire, or Greco-Greece and Rome. And in June, we're looking at a presentation from somebody at the Walters who gave a presentation recently and is looking forward to an exhibition in 2023. So with that, I'd like to thank Steve for hosting and thank everybody for your time. So thank you all very much.
All the best. All the best.
Bye.